This segment sponsored by Summit Physical Therapy. Today we are going to discuss the phases of healing after an injury or surgery, and we have experts here, physical therapist Andreas Lohmar and Austin Jacoby from Summit Physical Therapy to share more. Hello.
Hi.
How are you guys doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. Okay, so this is something that people face all the time. They either get injured or unfortunately have to have surgery, and yet there is so much that they don't know about the healing process. So share with me a little bit about the importance of healing properly.
So the one formula that people are probably most often familiar with is the RICE concept, the rest, ice, compression, elevation. And in recent years, we kind of had to maybe rethink a little bit of what comes after that, because that all is okay, and there's nothing wrong with that in the initial phase. But what it's really not addressing is, how do we get back to function? So what we see quite often is that I might see somebody in his 40s who strained his hamstring in high school and says, yeah, from time to time this still bothers me. And so there's a point in the healing process that they missed, and that is that return to function. And I'll have Austin elaborate a little bit on that as well.
Yes, well, you should share with us about that, how our muscles work and how what we miss sometimes with the tissues.
Yeah, an analogy I like to use is a lot of times our muscles are supposed to align, and they align in a way that's organized, where when a muscle contracts, it comes together, and then when it stretches, it comes apart. But if it comes too far apart, you get a tear. Well, our tissue is designed to bring new nutrients and bring cells into the area that lay down new tissue. So we heal. And so the RICE formula he was talking about, the icing to get swelling down and to get things to calm down where you're not painful, is great. But once that new tissue lays down, it looks a lot more like tangled hair. And it's not real pretty. It doesn't look like what the muscle used to look like.
Right.
But the pain is gone. Okay. So you go back, and I think there's two different types of people. There's some people that are more fearful, and they're like, oh, I have a bad leg now, or I can't do this because my bad hamstring. And they just continue to go down that path of avoidance. Or the person who's like, hey, I'm pain-free. I think I can go back and play ball.
Right.
But they've got this tangled hair tissue. And so coming into Summit Physical Therapy, you get the guidance of what can I do when and as fast as possible.
Right.
And so if we introduce movement, specific movement, so a hamstring tear, you don't necessarily want to go and fully stretch your hamstring. That just happened to it. Let's not do that again. But can we introduce movement to get back to function? And how do you know that you're ready to go without having a re-injury? Yes. And that's where we specialize.
Right. And Andreas, so you say that you all have been looking at this process and just trying to see what are the next steps after RICE. So what did you discover? What are the next steps?
So as Austin just explained, so once this new tissue lays itself down and you have this tangled hair mess, you oftentimes no longer have pain. And that's where the patient oftentimes, they confuse, when I say they confuse asymptomatic with healed. Just because you don't have symptoms doesn't mean you're healed, and you can do whatever you want. So there's no proper, what we refer to as the proper progression of forces. It's a little bit like breaking in an engine. So you don't get a new car and take it on the highway and gun it.
Right.
So what we help the patient do is get this tissue from this tangled hair stage to a stage where all the fibers align again. Because if they don't, this tangled tissue is sort of the proverbial weakest link in the chain. So when I see a patient who said, well, I haven't done anything in 6 weeks, and then I went for a jog. And my question is, so where's the progression? So you do nothing, and then you go for a jog, and now you re-tear it. Now you have that tangled tissue torn again. Now new collagen comes in, lays itself down, and the scar becomes, manifests itself. So that's why sometimes these things become chronic, because somebody has failed to go through these proper progressions of forces. I find it interesting that animals injure themselves in the woods, and they don't have the time for rice, you know. They don't have the time for all of that. And they just literally walk it off. And they oftentimes, they manage to regain function because they have to load these tissues because they have a predator right behind them.
Yeah, and they probably don't have access to the ice either.
Right.
Yes, and so through this process, the main message is knowing that you have to do more outside of your first state of healing, that there are more phases that are involved. And that's what's so important about having a physical therapist to help guide them through it.
Right.
Yeah.
And loading some of these tissues will reproduce a small amount of pain. In fact, we almost don't want it to be pain-free. We often say, we want your pain to be about a 3 out of 10. We don't want you to do a hamstring stretch that causes you an 8 or a 9 out of 10. You're just re-tearing what's just barely trying to heal. So guiding patients through these different phases is critical, and there's no schedule where you can say, oh, at 2 weeks you do this, at 4 weeks you do this. No, we load the tissues and we see what response we get, and according to the response, we guide the patient along.
Yeah.
So there's no cookbook.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing about this. We definitely have to revisit and talk more about this topic.
Okay.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
And if you would like more information about Summit Physical Therapy, we'll have their website listed below, and I'll see you after the break. This segment sponsored by Summit Physical Therapy.